Hi, I'm Jessica Woolwine.
Kelly Woolwine. We met on September 27th of 2008. A day, of course, I would never forget. Exactly 10 years later to the day, we took our 3.5-year-old daughter, Charlotte, into the pediatrician's office because we thought she had her first stomach bug. Our son, Fox, had just been born. He was weeks old. She had thrown up a couple times during the week, low-grade fever, 99 degrees, maybe 100. They tested her for everything, strep, flu, various bugs, couldn't come up with anything. And so after about 90 minutes or so, the doctor suggested that we go over to Roanoke Memorial and get an ultrasound because he wanted to rule out appendicitis.
I took Charlotte to the hospital, just her and I in there, and they started looking around and it was taking a while. They brought in an extra person. I started to get a weird vibe that things were off, but no one would really tell me anything. And then they left and said, "Miss Woolwine, we're gonna have someone come in and sit next to you and you're gonna get a phone call on this phone." So Charlotte's laying there and I was like, why is everybody acting so weird? So the pediatrician was on the phone. I guess they relayed to him what they saw on the ultrasound since he was the provider that sent us there. And he said Charlotte's liver is about 4 times the size that it should be, but we can't really tell you anything until we run some more tests. And with my science and medical background, I knew that it was really serious. So I immediately called Kelly and told him, "You just need to get here. Something's going on with her liver that's not good." And then I called my parents. My mom and dad immediately just threw some stuff in a bag, got in the car. By that night, she was being prepped to go in and do a spinal biopsy and a liver biopsy and then get a port put in her chest because they were telling us that she had stage 4 hepatoblastoma, which is a rare liver cancer, and it had spread to both of her lungs.
When they did the ultrasound that day, we never left the hospital again.
For a long time. When we were sitting outside the room, we always call Charlotte Little Charles. And Kelly said, "What if we lose little Charles?" And I said, "We're not going to. But if we do, we have to survive this because we have another child. We just had a son and we have to take care of him and we have to be parents to him." But then I said, "But we're not going to lose Charlotte. We're going to figure this out." And that was one of many times where we just had to face what was happening, but also find it within ourselves to just fight.
Was getting her first dose of chemotherapy less than 36 hours later. I was still in my work clothes. Charlotte was barely conscious, very sick. The team that was treating us hadn't seen that particular disease before. The burden of that disease was overwhelming. 3 weeks in, we were medically transported to Cincinnati Children's.
And when we were in Roanoke, the team there did everything that they knew to do and that the protocol says to do for hepatoblastoma, but Charlotte needed a lot of extra special care. This was very rare and none of them had ever treated it before. That's a whole separate specialized section from the kids who have leukemia and blood diseases, and so it's very specialized. And we were very lucky to get to go to such a world-renowned children's hospital, and Charlotte received wonderful care there. It was such a complicated road, and there were many times that even our team there didn't know how it was going to go.
We spent 1 year living in Cincinnati. We missed our son's whole first year for the most part. Very intense treatment. The world of chemo and surgery for a child is very different. They can't advocate for themselves. They can't drive themselves in for a transfusion. Life stops. It's been 4 years and Charlotte just had her 8th birthday. She's had probably over a dozen surgeries total. She ended up having to have a liver transplant. Our little girl started her first day of school with a slick bald head,
and
hearing
her little
aids
hearing
from her
aids. Her
chemotherapy.
chemotherapy caused hearing loss.
But kids are also resilient. Our little unicorn warrior has an incredible heart. She was completely unfazed.
Through this whole journey, Charlotte has really guided us because she has been so strong and smiles her way through it. And if she can do that, if Charlotte can get through this the way that she does, then we can do that. And so we just follow her lead.
We had to talk to her about the last surgery. She was 7 and quite intelligent and cognizant and asked very good questions. And there is no section in the Mommy and Daddy handbook for that conversation when you're talking about a lung surgery to remove cancer. Another thing that comes with pediatric cancer is you're immersed in a culture. We've come to realize how blessed we are in some ways because we've gotten to know other families who were diagnosed with cancer or blood disease, and not everyone has the means. Here in Southwest Virginia, it's very likely that you will have to go elsewhere to receive the specialized care and the resources you need. And sometimes you don't know what you need until you realize you didn't have it. We've gotten to know some families that are near and dear to us
whose journey it ended earlier maybe than it could have, should have. And when we lived on the oncology floor in Cincinnati, it was kind of like you were living in an apartment complex and these are your neighbors. I met so many mothers and fathers and watched some of them lose their kids, and some of them battling just like us, had to travel away from where they lived. They couldn't all be there, and sometimes none of them could be there. So you have little kids in a hospital fighting for their life with no family there. And a lot of them they'd lose their home, they lost their jobs. And so if you have the ability to stay closer to home so that you have that support system is everything for those children. It is actually a part of what gets them through it. Sure, the medicine and other medical resources are the biological and scientific part that cure children, but keeping their spirit alive and up is a huge part of them being cured.
And we got to know some very sweet young souls with a lot to offer the world that are not here anymore. Oftentimes, the treatment and cure of this disease is just resources. And you have to go where they are, or they have to be where you are. And all of these kids are worth every single ounce of resource that can be given to them.
Children are actually a lot easier to cure than adults with cancer because they're so resilient. We have a very small fraction of the resources that are available to adults for children. What we saw is that even with old, antiquated chemotherapies that are for adults, these kids are just bouncing right back, and just shows that even with what we have now, it's so doable. We can cure these kids if we could give them more.
And most importantly, we need the resources where our kids are. Our first major surgery in Cincinnati, we were standing there in a waiting room, 3 a.m, all by ourselves.
Yeah.
Just the 2 of us. So thank goodness we had each other. We probably didn't see anyone we knew in person more than 2 or 3 times for a solid year.
Oh yeah.
That just makes the journey so much harder.
Because Roanoke Memorial covers such a huge region, it's absolutely necessary. There are so many people in Southwest Virginia, West Virginia, and when they're diagnosed, this is the closest larger hospital for them to come to, so they deserve that.
And the beautiful part about it is sometimes the difference are resources around transfusion. They can be radiological, they can be nutritional. These are resources that money can buy. This is doable. World-class care can be right here in Southwest Virginia, in Roanoke, Virginia. It is just a matter of money. We all have to accept our own mortality, and you can reconcile that, you can accept that, you can carry that because you know that. The one thing I think a man or a woman is not built to do is to face that with their kids. A man is not built to watch his child suffer and face that threat. There's something very unnatural about it. In those first few weeks, we were losing her. And it all happened so fast. When it's your child there slipping away from you, how do you know what's enough? Because you're never going to surrender. But when we were there in those moments where she had basically lost consciousness and was fading from us, that's as dark as it gets. There's so many families in the valley that had those same feelings that we did, and their worst fears were realized. And that's what we have to use all this for, is to change the outcome for the next family. Here's what's possible. The number sounds big, but it really isn't if everyone can join the fight. Our effort is to raise $20 million to resource, fund, plan, and build a pediatric oncology and hematology center here in Roanoke, Virginia, as part of Carilion's new cancer center. And that will serve all of the Southwest Virginia region and even into parts of other states. And what does that really mean? Imagine here in the valley, if our children were to be so unfortunate as to be diagnosed with a pediatric cancer or blood disease, to get through that treatment and win that fight without having to leave their homes, their families, to have their villages here with them to support them. The extensive travel and being away or not being able to go can have a catastrophic consequence in the fight against pediatric cancer and blood disorder. It is possible with your help that we can raise the money and provide the resources to have a multi-generational impact on treatment of pediatric cancer and blood disorders here in the valley. This is such a unique philanthropic opportunity. You can donate your money to this cause through the Life Ring Foundation or the FightingKidsCancer.com brand, or directly to Carilion for that matter. And we can trace exactly where your money goes and what exactly your money is going to provide for kids who are diagnosed here in the valley.
Every single cent will make a difference because it is going to take the whole community to do this. But what a wonderful thing for our community to come together for, to save children, to save our children. Unfortunately, pediatric cancer is not as rare as people may think. And someone watching this, unfortunately, if you don't already know a child who's battled pediatric cancer, you're going to at some point. These are your neighbors. These might be your family members. We want to help these kids, and we want to do it, all of us together.
The future of the Roanoke Valley rests in the hands of our kids. The girls and boys that overcome pediatric cancer and pediatric blood disorders become heroic men and women who will have tremendous positive high impact on our valley for generations to come.